Have you ever found yourself completely drawn to someone who seemed equally into you at first, only to watch them slowly shut down just as the connection started to deepen? If you've experienced this kind of emotional whiplash, where intimacy feels electric one moment and terrifying the next, you may have been dealing with someone who has a fearful avoidant attachment style. I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video, we're going to explore a side of fearful avoidance that almost no one talks about, what they're most attracted to, the specific traits, energies, and emotional signals that pull them in at the beginning. And here's the twist. The very things that make them feel magnetically drawn to you are often the same things that later activate their fears and cause them to pull away. Understanding this paradox is a game changer, because once you see the pattern clearly, you stop internalizing their retreat as a reflection of your worth and start realizing it's about their own nervous system trying to manage closeness and threat at the same time. We're going to break down the top emotional qualities that hook fearful avoidance early on and why those traits feel so compelling to them, even though they often aren't ready to fully receive or sustain them. One of these attraction points will likely surprise you. Another one might sound a lot like you. And the last one is something they crave desperately but also fear the most. So if you're tired of feeling confused, misled, or emotionally spun around by people who come close only to push you away, this is a conversation you need to hear. Stick around until the end, because once you understand why they're drawn to you, you'll be able to choose relationships with far more clarity and far less chaos. And don't forget to subscribe for more grounded, psychologically informed videos like this. Let's get started. One of the most important things to understand, especially if you're trying to make sense of why fearful avoidants are drawn to certain relationship patterns, is that every single one of us operates from an internal comfort zone. And here's the key. This comfort zone isn't logical, and it's not necessarily healthy. It's built from repetition, from what we've experienced emotionally over and over again in the past. Your nervous system doesn't crave what's best for you. It craves what's familiar. And for someone with a fearful avoidant attachment style, that familiarity is often tied to pain, unpredictability, and emotional chaos. Let's say you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where affection came with pressure, where trust was broken or connection felt unsafe. Maybe you had to prove your worth constantly, just to receive scraps of approval. That emotional environment becomes your blueprint. And as you grow up, your subconscious doesn't forget it. In fact, it starts to scan the world for relationships that replicate that pattern, not because you consciously want that, but because your subconscious has been wired to treat it as whole. This is why fearful avoidants can intellectually say, "I want a stable, secure relationship. I want to feel safe and deeply connected." But in practice, they often find themselves magnetized toward people who are inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or even subtly rejecting. Not because they enjoy the chaos, but because, deep down, that chaos is familiar, and the subconscious is always trying to resolve unfinished emotional business by recreating the dynamic, hoping this time it will end differently. Here's where it gets frustrating. The conscious mind might say, "I'm done with drama, I want peace." But the subconscious pulls them straight back into patterns that echo unresolved pain. And the pull is powerful. Why? Because while your conscious mind processes a limited stream of information, maybe 40 to 60 bits per second, your subconscious is processing up to 1 billion bits of data at the same time. That's the operating system running in the background, constantly influencing what you're drawn to, who you trust, and who you let in. This is why fearful avoidants often end up in relationships that leave them feeling unseen, unworthy, or exhausted. Because their nervous system is trying to resolve something old, not build something new. Until that pattern is made conscious, it keeps repeating. So if you've ever asked yourself, "Why do I keep ending up in the same kind of relationship?" this is the answer. It's not self-sabotage, it's self-protection based on outdated programming. So what do you actually do when you realize you're stuck in a cycle? When you're attracting the same emotionally unavailable people, ending up in the same frustrating patterns, and feeling the same deep disappointment no matter how many times you try again? The answer isn't about forcing yourself to date differently or changing how others treat you. It's about going inward and shifting the relationship you have with yourself, because at the root of these repeated dynamics is something far deeper: your subconscious blueprint. And if that blueprint doesn't change, the story keeps repeating, just with different faces. Every one of us has what you might call a familiar zone, a psychological home base created by the emotional experiences we had growing up. For fearful avoidance in particular, that zone is often wired with chaos, uncertainty, emotional rejection, or pressure to perform. So even if consciously you want peace, partnership, and safety, if those things weren't part of your early emotional world, they won't feel familiar. And what's unfamiliar often doesn't feel attractive. It feels boring or even threatening. This is where reprogramming comes in. The subconscious doesn't change just because you want it to. It changes through repetition plus emotion, the same way it was wired in the first place. So step one is learning to recognize your unconscious patterns. What types of relationships feel magnetic to you but always end in confusion or pain? What dynamics feel normal, even if they're unhealthy? Once you isolate those patterns, you begin the deeper work of rewiring them. By consistently showing up for yourself in the exact ways you wished others had shown up for you. For fearful avoidance, this often means becoming someone who respects your own emotional needs instead of minimizing them. If, in the past, your needs were neglected or shamed, you likely learned to ignore them or to prioritize everyone else's. That coping mechanism may have protected you then, but now it quietly sets the tone for one-sided relationships in adulthood. You may find yourself overgiving, rescuing others, or being drawn to people who mirror your early experiences. Emotionally unavailable, critical, or inconsistent. Why? Because that's what your subconscious was taught to associate with love. And if you often feel like you have to earn your worth, if you were raised in an environment where love felt conditional, guess what? You may now create dynamics where you continue to prove, hustle, and perform, even when no one's asking you to. It's not intentional self-sabotage. It's survival mode loyalty to an outdated emotional script. Many fearful avoidants become their own worst critics. They unconsciously shame themselves, judge themselves, and then end up in relationships with people who do the same. And yes, sometimes fearful avoidants are drawn to wounded bird types, partners who need fixing or saving. There's a part of them that feels safest when they're needed, but not necessarily seen. The problem is, those relationships often become draining. One person is doing the emotional labor while the other leans in only when it's convenient. Without mutual exchange, even the most generous heart will burn out. The solution? Start making your emotional well-being the standard you don't bend. Begin practicing boundaries, self-respect, and inner validation, even in small, quiet ways. The more you reinforce those shifts, the more your nervous system starts to associate healthy with safe. And that's when you stop chasing what hurts and start choosing what heals. So the real work begins not with trying to control how others show up in your life, but in how you consistently begin showing up for yourself. The first step is recognizing the emotional patterns that no longer serve you, and then taking small, intentional actions to rewire the way you relate to your own needs. Because if you want to stop attracting people who neglect you, dismiss your boundaries, or make you feel unseen, you have to stop doing those things to yourself first. This means identifying the emotional needs that have historically gone unmet. Things like safety, consistency, affection, respect, and creating space for them inside your daily life. Write them down, make it tangible. Ask yourself, if I truly valued myself, what would I do differently today? Then pick one small thing and do it every single day. Here's why this matters. Your subconscious doesn't shift through logic or intention alone. It changes through repetition and emotion. When you repeatedly treat yourself with the care you have always longed for and connect to that act emotionally, you're not just practicing self-love, you're literally forming new neural pathways. Each time you prioritize your needs instead of abandoning them, you're strengthening the new wiring. And with enough repetition, those old survival circuits linked to chaos, unworthiness, or emotional self-neglect begin to fade. They lose their grip because you're feeding something healthier in their place. This is where healing becomes real, not in theory, but in your nervous system. When you begin consistently showing up for yourself with kindness, presence, and healthy boundaries, you're not just doing self-care. You're training your subconscious to expect more, to recognize safety, to stop chasing chaos dressed up as love. And that shift doesn't happen through force or overthinking. It happens through simple, repeated emotional experiences where you meet your own needs before asking someone else to. That could look like pausing when you're triggered instead of reacting, saying no when something doesn't feel aligned, or taking 5 minutes in the morning to check in with yourself. What do I feel? What do I need today? When you respond to those needs with compassion rather than judgment, you are rewiring the way your brain interprets connection. Instead of believing love equals performance, sacrifice, or anxiety, your system starts to associate love with calm, truth, and emotional reciprocity. And from there, something powerful starts to happen. You begin to lose interest in people who don't match that energy. You stop over-explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You let silence speak louder than words in relationships that never felt mutual. And most importantly, you begin building connections that reflect the inner safety you've worked so hard to cultivate. But here's the part most people overlook. Healing doesn't mean you never get triggered again. It means when you do get triggered, you no longer abandon yourself in the process. You slow down. You breathe. You recognize the old pattern whispering in your ear, and you choose differently. You respond instead of react. You honor your own timing, and in doing so, you reinforce the message, I am safe now. I don't have to relive the past to prove I've survived it. So if you're on this journey of breaking old patterns and attracting healthier relationships, let this be your reminder. You don't have to fix everything all at once. You just have to start treating yourself like someone worthy of patience, consistency, and respect. That one habit, practiced daily, is enough to change your entire emotional landscape over time. Healing isn't a destination, it's a relationship, one between you. And the more you show up with gentleness and truth, the more aligned your external relationships will become. Not by accident, but by design. Eventually something clicks. You start noticing red flags faster. You stop chasing people who offer breadcrumbs. You become less reactive to inconsistency because it no longer feels normal. And perhaps most importantly, your conscious desires and subconscious expectations begin to align. The relationships you once longed for but couldn't seem to hold on to, they begin to feel not just possible, but natural, familiar even. And that's when you know the deeper work is paying off. So if this message resonated with you, if you're starting to see the ways your own patterns have shaped what you've attracted and what you've tolerated, then I want you to know this. Real change doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when you start choosing yourself in small, consistent ways. The more you commit to showing up for your own needs, the more your life starts reflecting that shift back to you. That's how healing becomes attraction. That's how inner safety becomes real intimacy. Thank you for watching and for being a part of this journey. Your growth matters. If something clicked for you in this video, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What pattern are you ready to leave behind? What new standard are you holding for yourself? Your story could be the one that helps someone else see their own more clearly. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for more grounded guidance on attachment, self-worth, and emotionally healthy love. Until next time, take care of yourself like someone worth choosing, because you are.